welcome to the Omniture On-Demand Marketing Series. My name is Brian Watkins, and I'm on the PR team here and manage our social media strategy. I'm very pleased to welcome you here today. We have two excellent presenters who have prepared great content to help you become a better marketer. Our hope is that by the end of this webinar, you'll have the research and best practices you need to monitor your brand online and measure the impact of social media. If you do have any questions about this content, you can email us at webinars@omniture.com. So Omniture has an online marketing suite where our products are grouped into a few different buckets, from visitor acquisition, conversion, online analytics, and channel analytics. Today we're going to be talking specifically about Site Catalyst and more specifically about how to measure social media within Site Catalyst. Today we have great presenters, and I'm pleased to present Sergio Bolaño. He's a senior analyst with the Marketing Sherpa Research Group. His research covers the topics of social media marketing and PR, email marketing, and also business technology marketing for Marketing Sherpa's benchmark guides and special reports. Sergio is a frequent speaker on these topics at Marketing Sherpa summits, industry conferences, and online events. His 30 years of marketing experience have included roles as a client-side executive, agency principal, consultant, and now analyst. Welcome, Sergio.
Thank you very much, Brian, and hello, Ted. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share some of the information that I've received from our recent social media research and benchmark guide.
I'm also pleased to announce Ted McDonald is joining us. Ted McDonald manages the Web Analytics program at National Geographic in Washington, D.C. Ted uses 10 years of web analytics experience to provide timely insight into National Geographic's audience, allowing them to continually improve their user experience, return on ad spend, and conversion rates. Welcome, Ted.
Yeah, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Great, and now we'll turn the time over to Sergio to walk us through his slides.
Thank you again, and the information that I'm going to share today is from our recent benchmark study, the 2009 Social Media Marketing and PR Benchmark Guide, and I'm very happy to share it with the Omniture audience. In this morning's presentation, I'd like to discuss what's driving social media marketing and what the barriers are to adopting social media by many companies. I'd also like to talk about which social media tactics marketers are finding most effective and the best practices for managing your brand in the social space. First, I'd like to just give a very broad idea of where social media stands. And in this chart, what you're seeing is our responses to the question, are you using some form of social media for marketing? And as you can see, about 8 out of 10 companies of all sizes are using some form of social media. So size is not a competitor, is not a barrier. Your competitors, other people in your field are using social media. And the reason for that is the same reason that, or the same situation that occurred at the beginning of the World Wide Web, when basically every company had a static brochureware website, and it cost very little to have a web presence. Of course, today, to have very competitive web applications and websites, we're talking about 6 or 7 figures to implement them. But social media is still a relatively inexpensive venue from a technology standpoint. We also wanted to know what social media is good for from the perspective of marketers. And what we found, as this chart shows, is at the top of the list, branding strategies like influencing brand reputation and increasing brand awareness were the most effective strategies that social media was able to perform. Next on the list are search engine optimization related strategies for improving search engine rankings and increasing website traffic. And SEO has been a very compatible tactic for use with social media since the beginning of social media. It's a very natural way to build links and add content that are factors in increasing website rankings or search engine rankings. Lead generation and other direct marketing tactics or strategies like increasing online sales is lower on the list, but these are starting to emerge very rapidly as best practices begin to emerge. And one of the things that we always look at to determine where a tactic is, whether it's an established one or an emerging one, is to look at how people are spending on it and planning to spend on it. And in this case, if you look at the top two items here, there are only two tactics, social media and email, that are increasing in terms of budget size faster than they're decreasing. Everything else has more marketers are decreasing their budgets than are increasing those budgets. And we feel strongly that social media and email are benefiting from the perception that they are free or low-cost tactics to implement, when in fact the reason the budgets are increasing faster than others is because both tend to be, especially social media, tends to be more human capital intensive. So salaries become a bulk of the spending. Social media and email are also beginning to integrate more. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a presentation now that is talking about email and social media integrating and how email service providers are implementing tools that recipients can use to share their emails with social media networks. Something that we found very surprising here, and then began to understand why, is that B2B is leading B2C in the adoption rate of social media marketing. And coming from a background in which most of my 30 years in marketing was B2B, it was no secret that B2B always lagged behind B2C in adopting emerging new tactics. A good example of that is a lot of B2B marketers would wait to see if an application or a strategy worked on consumer websites before they would implement them on their own websites. But when you look at these tactics and you understand that B2B is being adopted faster than B2C, you realize that the reason that this is happening is that B2B sales and marketing efforts are driven by personal relationships. The purchase process is much longer and much more complicated in B2B than it is in consumer purchases for the most part. So building relationships, which is what social media does best, is what is helping B2B take the lead. But when we look at all of the factors and we wonder, well, why is social media being adopted so quickly, what we find is that it's really about the conversation. As marketers, especially ones that have been around for a number of years, you became accustomed to the fact that your brand was what you said it was, because everything people learned about your brand was within one-way communications. It was what you were telling them your brand was. But your brand is no longer what you say it is. It's what they say it is. And by they, I'm referring to your customers, your prospects, journalists, and other influencers who are having conversations about your brand, reviewing them and talking about them within social media platforms. And because of the technology, they're forming and sharing opinions and then sharing them at the speed of light, and these opinions are impacting your brand. And what's really needed by most marketers today is a strong social media strategy. It's needed in order to control and cultivate the interactions that are taking place within social media. And to get an idea, I'll go through quickly of where these conversations are starting and where they're going. And what we see in this chart are where buyers and influencers are getting their information about your product. And if we looked at a chart like this just 2 years ago, social media websites may not even be on this chart, but now they've surpassed company websites as a source of information. The reason for that is during the buying consideration process, and it doesn't matter whether it's a toaster that a consumer is buying or a large piece of equipment that a business buyer is purchasing, during that consideration stage, they're looking for objective opinions by users of the products. And on social media websites, they're finding these objective opinions. Company websites, though, they're going to remain up there. It's not going to deteriorate the need for company websites because company websites are where you find subjective information like specifications and technical information. So once these buyers and influencers are gathering this information, now we're finding that they're sharing it more often on social media websites than with other websites like companies or news websites. And the reason for this is that social media uses Web 2.0 tools which are designed specifically to make sharing with your friends and peers easier. The upside to that is that sharing creates this viral effect of reaching more people. The problem is it also creates this viral effect that reaches exponentially more people, and that's a downside if those comments or if opinions are negative. So with negative commentary out there and something that is a reality that has to be addressed, we wanted to know how marketers are responding to this negative commentary to control their communications through social media. And what we found, what this chart summarizes, is that larger companies are more likely to monitor commentary about their brands, while small and mid-sized businesses are more likely to respond with public rebuttals. And on the surface, this may seem like small and mid-sized companies are doing the right thing, but you have to consider that sometimes responding to a negative comment can simply draw more attention to it. Without some way to control that, control the responses, it can be more detrimental than beneficial. So we wanted a little qualitative information about how marketers are responding to negative commentary. And so what some of the marketers who were asked told us, this is one example: we acknowledge, admit the issue, and where possible explain how we're addressing it. Another one told us that we just erase the comment from Facebook. We don't engage critics. I guarantee you this isn't a PR person. And then the third one, we monitor everything but respond case by case using a set of criteria we've developed. This is probably the most rational, the soundest strategy for responding to negative commentary. But what is this set of criteria that they've developed? And so we asked marketers if they have a social media policy to manage their communications, which is basically, do you have a set of criteria to manage your social media communications? And what we found was, on the downside, most don't have a policy, but on the upside, they do recognize the need for it. And when I'm presenting this information in front of a live audience, the question that comes up at this point is, well, where do we get a template that will show us what to use for it? And my response to that is, well, you can use examples that other companies have published for social media policies, but you really need to have a custom one or a customized policy that's designed specifically for your business situation. And Brian, I understand that you've just gone through this process of developing a social media policy for Omniture, and I was wondering if there are any obstacles or roadblocks that you wanted to tell people you came across at this point.
Definitely, yeah. In fact, we just recently agreed on a social media policy. It's surprising to me that, according to your research, there are so few companies that actually have a policy in place. We did recognize the need for it early on, but it was definitely a process. What I did is I took benchmarks from other companies, other similar companies in our area, and wrote one based on that, using some of those key points. And then what we did is worked with legal on what exactly needs to be stated explicitly. I think if it looks too legal, then people aren't going to read it. And I think also, along with rolling out a policy, you need to have good training of your employees during the HR onboarding process when you get new employees, and also making sure that the employees that you already have understand what is okay and what isn't.
Great. And so I'm going to quickly take you through. While we don't have a template that you can copy and make your own social media policy. We do have some best practices that we'd like to talk about. And the first of three basic areas is you want to empower everyone to engage responsibly. Then you want to define the rules for the engagement that you're allowing your employees to entertain. And then you want to moderate the good, the bad, but not the ugly, and I'll explain that further. First, empowering everyone to engage responsibly. With social media, it's a matter of the more people you have, especially employees, that you have engaging with people on social media about your brands and about your company, the better it is. So you want to give employees the choice to participate and enable them in whatever way is necessary to participate. But you want to clarify with them the difference between their corporate role and their personal participation on their own personal Facebook account, for example. Next, you need defining principles of engagement, and basically this can come down to a couple of key objectives. And in most cases, you can simplify the objectives to, we're here on social media to learn and to contribute. That's what drives social media. It's not about being promotional, and it's not about selling. It's about learning and contributing. Next, you have to make sure that, and this is probably the most important, and it's probably what you've addressed very well, Brian, by taking it to legal. You want to make sure that your social media policy forces participants to comply with general business conduct policies. The same policies that apply in the office apply on social media. You don't allow employees to harass colleagues in the office, and you don't allow them to harass colleagues in the social space. Well, defining the rules of engagement, now that they're engagement, the first one is to be transparent but judicious. Make sure they're identifying themselves and that they're explaining their role and why they're commenting on the information that relates to your brand. Be very honest. It's not acceptable to be covert. That's how a lot of people thought they could get into social media, by masking themselves, but it's not a good practice. You also don't want to violate privacy or confidentiality policies. There are a lot of things that a company doesn't want said, and most of them are obvious. You also want them to write what they know about, to contribute within their own area of expertise. If they're talking about something they know nothing about, people are going to become aware of it and they're going to lose credibility. And one way you can help to control this is by explaining to employees that they're responsible for the content that they provide. So unless they want to pay the consequences, stay within their area of expertise. And they should also know that every conversation, the purpose of their being there is to add value. So they want to be a thought leader. They want to talk about things that other people aren't talking about, or talk about it in a thought-provoking way. And to remember it's a conversation, to encourage comments, and to deal with it, because a lot of marketers, again, are used to one-way communications. They're not used to having people comment about what they're saying, and that's something that takes some getting used to. When we talked about moderating the good, the bad, but not the ugly, we first have to explain that moderating is the act of reviewing and approving third-party content contributed to sites within your control. So your own company blog or your Twitter accounts or your company's Facebook page, those are within your control. And there are generally two types of commentary on a blog, for example. You have anonymous participants who are leaving content, and you have registered users. Well, in the case of registered users, you want to moderate only what you have to. It could even be automatic, so it's an option to moderate it. But anonymous users, you really want to moderate everything that they're saying. But you want to moderate in a way that is not biased against unfavorable information. Show them everything. Show them the good and the bad. Leave it on there. The only time you don't want to show something is the ugly. You want to reject the offensive, denigrating, or out-of-context information that's on the sites in your control. So we learned about the drivers, and let's quickly review what some of the barriers are. And there's one important barrier that tends to lead to everything else, and that's the top one, lack of knowledgeable staff. It's not surprising that more marketers said that lack of knowledgeable staff was a barrier, more so than any other barrier to adopting social media, because social media hasn't been around that long. You can't find someone with 5 years of experience in social media to lead the charge. You tend to pick people out of the office that have a Facebook account and have used other social media tactics, and they learn on the job. The problem
Sergio, I think that's a good point. Sorry to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great point because one of the things that I've found is you just can't mandate people to blog or people to be excited about social media within a company, as well as we've had more success just identifying people who already get that, who already are excited about social media and are already blogging, and then just empowering them according to the guidelines that you talked about. Those are the people that I think are going to have more success using social media in a corporate environment rather than trying to force people who aren't as passionate about it to use it.
Right. That reflects what a lot of companies are doing. They are taking experience, even if it's just the user side rather than the marketer side experience, and leveraging that. But what this lack of knowledgeable staff is causing are some misconceptions in other areas, like the second item on the list, the inability to measure ROI. Well, measuring ROI, it just depends on how you look at it. In social media, it's a little different. You can measure ROI quantitatively to get the metrics that you need, but you also have to measure social media qualitatively. It's not always the number of comments that you get on a blog. It's the tone of the comments. Are people objecting to what you're saying? Are there negative comments? That's what can be measured as well as the quantitative elements. And so, one of the other things that is happening with this lack of knowledge is it's causing some misunderstandings about effectiveness. And especially that element of measurability, not being able to measure ROI. And my favorite part of this chart is at the top. Blog or social network advertising happens to be the tactic that is the most accurately measurable, but the least effective. Now, that seems more of a misconception than it does reality, because if it is, only because they're selecting that because advertising click-through rates are easily measurable. But when you go down further on the list and you look at things like blogger or online journalist relationships, where they're considered very effective but not very measurable, you start to see that, well, now there's getting to be some confusion here. We can measure some of these things and how a lead comes from a blog and ends up on our website and is captured there. So those are the kind of misconceptions you want to get out of the way. One of the other, just as an example of the tactics that are being missed, the opportunities that are being missed because of this lack of knowledge, are social media releases. They're an extremely effective tactic in social media. While 80% of the marketers that we surveyed in this study use some form of social media, only 20% of them were using social media releases. And they are effective, and I'm going to give you a real quick example that I learned earlier from Ted McDonald in National Geographic. Ted is going to show you a chart that shows where leads are landing, where most visitors are landing on the National Geographic site, and it has to do with their newsroom, which I went in and checked, and they're using social media release templates for their news. This is allowing them to aggregate news content in a manner that is very engaging to people on social media. It's easy for online journalists and bloggers to get information, to get videos, to get any other multimedia that they need from those sites. And it takes integration, and what we looked at was are people integrating? We know they're integrating online tactics with social media, but are they integrating offline as well? And while agencies do tend to be more likely than marketers to integrate both offline and online, we found that very few are actually integrating offline tactics only with social media. And I want to give you a quick example here of what I found as a great campaign example of integrating traditional media. On the left, you see an ad by Dentyne that was in a magazine, and on the right is a YouTube from the same campaign, a commercial from the same campaign. And what they did, what's so important about this case, is that Dentyne not only had an ad that referred people to see a YouTube video to increase traffic to that video, but they used a social media concept to do that. The headline, "Friend Request Accepted," as anyone who has a Facebook account knows, is something that's very recognizable. And so if you're reading that and that's capturing your attention, you're more than likely also sitting at your computer and can easily get to the video that it references on YouTube. So what this does is it takes these marketers who are used to having X number of exposures to a magazine ad are now increasing that exposure by sending people to their YouTube video, and the more people who are on the YouTube video are sharing that YouTube video and exponentially increasing the reach of their campaigns. It looks like I'm running out of time, so these next two slides are not very important, and I'm going to end my presentation and thank you very much. And if anyone does need to contact me either by email or through LinkedIn, the information is provided here.
Sergio, that's great. Thank you very much. Ted, let's turn the time over to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was very interesting. I hope to give you a little bit more information about the impact of social media on a website from a practitioner's perspective. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Ted McDonald, manager of the Web Analytics Program at National Geographic. I've been there 3 years now and have been working with Omniture products since 2004. I spoke at one of the Omniture Summits last year and then again at a recent Omniture Cafe, presenting the findings I'm about to share with you regarding National Geographic's tracking and analysis of social media site visitors. So when presenting about social media, excuse me, I like to start with the many different ways that it's defined, because this has been a part of our problem when it comes to reporting. We here at National Geographic waffled for a really long time on the question of what exactly to report as social media, rather than just kind of getting on with it and looking at the impact of social media and the areas to improve. So here's some of the definitions I found, sticking with the theme, all from social media sites. And the one I found on Flickr, by the way, a group of media producers that's primarily its own audience, is now my favorite way to describe social media. And I said many different ways, and I meant many. There's a ton of definitions out there. Everybody seems to be a social media expert these days, and everybody defines it differently. So how can you make sense of all those definitions, and which one should you use at your organization? Well, I think the answer is just to simply accept that there are 1,000 definitions for social media out there, and then you decide what social media means to your organization. And then when it comes to classifying your sources of traffic and determining what is and isn't a social media site, don't do what we did and dwell on the little things, like whether a certain blog should be considered social media or not. With so many different refers, National Geographic has hundreds of thousands. Just use some basic rules to just get started with your social media analysis, or you're going to bog yourself down with all those little details. So just know that you can always change how you classify sites, and then just get started. So when we started, I guess I started the process of classifying our referring sources of traffic, including all of our tracking codes, earlier this year in 2009. Started out simple, just by putting each value that we had in our standard traffic sources report into one of 7 categories. We have organic search, other websites, social media sites, pay-per-click ads, National Geographic email lists, display advertising, and vanity URLs. And about a quarter of our visits have no refer information. We suspect they're coming from sources like email or bookmarks. So even now, just with this simple process of categorizing all our refers into one of these 7 categories, we can easily see that organic search is very big for us, 42%. And here's an example of some similar reporting right out of Omniture Site Catalyst. Here I'm not looking at percent of total traffic. I'm looking at some engagement metrics for these categories. You can see pages per visit for those categories I mentioned, as well as revenue per visit. So what else does this sort of categorization of our traffic sources get us? Well, we can now easily see the increasing impact of social media on our overall site traffic. So last month, for instance, visitors from social media sites accounted for 8.4% of our traffic, the highest percent ever. And visits from social media sites more than doubled from June 2008. Here's another example right out of Site Catalyst. We can also then compare categories of traffic and see how they're performing over time. So here you can see that the rising impact of social media is kind of lessening our reliance on pay-per-click ads, paid media, to meet the demand for ad impressions on our site. We used to have to spend a lot using like Google AdWords to meet the ad demands of our advertisers for key categories like travel and environment. And since we're doing much better now in social media, it's not as necessary. And I showed a little snapshot of this before in Site Catalyst, but it's very interesting to look at how these visitors from all these categories are interacting differently on our site. So visitors from social media sites, for instance, are only looking at 4.2 pages per visit compared to our overall average of 10 pages per visit. So they aren't looking at anywhere near as many pages per visit as the other categories. And for you practitioners looking to categorize your sources of traffic like we're doing, I want to give you some quick tips just to get started. First, although you may be able to categorize your refers a dozen different ways or more, start out small, like I did earlier this year, with just refer a category for broad sources like organic search and social media, and then use a report called Key Refers for more granular reporting of individual sites like Dig and StumbleUpon. I like this Key Refers report because many sites like StumbleUpon report thousands and thousands of unique subdomains to our standard refers report. And so this allows us to classify all those values along with any tracking codes from advertising that we've done on StumbleUpon into just one single value, so we can see traffic from StumbleUpon over time and how that audience is interacting with our site. So once you get comfortable with the refer a category and Key Refers report, consider some other ways of classifying your sources of traffic as well. We use Channel, for instance, to report all traffic from large networks like Google and Yahoo. Media types we use to show traffic from banners versus search ads versus link campaigns, etc. Campaign types, I actually end up using this as kind of a catch-all, a miscellaneous category, and I use promotions to show traffic coming from campaigns around, say, different shows on our channel, like Dog Whisperer, or different events that we may have going on, like Earth Day. And I've also found it useful to use classifications to create a single report that shows only social media sites. So you just have one report that just is populated with the social media sites, because I get asked that all the time. Some other tips, touched on a little bit earlier, don't go classification crazy. You don't have to do everything at once. You're just going to bog yourself down, get started small, and then get more detailed as you go on and get used to the reporting. Use a standard naming convention for all your tracking codes. So have a standard format for all the codes that you use within your emails, all the codes that you use for pay-per-click, all the codes that you may use on Twitter, and make sure everybody in your organization that is doing social media promoting is using those same codes and the same formatting. And that way, that allows you to kind of classify what you can in advance to keep the work required to maintain this type of reporting down to a minimum. Also use a single file for all of your sites. National Geographic has about 30 or 40 different websites, and I use one file for all the traffic sources classifications. And, again, don't feel like you have to classify all sources into every category. If it only makes sense to categorize one source of traffic 2 different ways, then that's fine. That works. You can always change it. So for the social media category, there's thousands of social media sites, and there are different ways that you can actually categorize those if you think about it. So, which sites belong where in the categorization? Should dig be lumped in with stumble upon and so on? We researched this for a while, and this is actually this is posted on the president of our division's wall. I don't think he gets much use out of it because it's just kind of, like I said, overkill. So this person has classified social media into about 25 different categories. This makes reporting these categories very, very difficult and maintaining this very difficult. We started there and quickly realized that approach was not for us. The second approach we looked at is actually from Omniture, and I will give it to them. This is a very intro to social media and the different categories of social media. And yes, it's social media in 30 seconds, but we needed a little bit more detail in how we categorize social media sites. So the approach we liked most was actually from Danny Sullivan, SEO guru. He mentioned in a post earlier this year on his site 5 different subcategories of social media: social news, social bookmarking, social networking, social knowledge, and social sharing. We liked that and pretty much went with it with only one change. We changed social sharing to social media sharing, so that would be like video and photo sharing sites, and we put Twitter in the social news category. And by doing this, very quickly saw that social news accounts for half of all of our traffic coming from social media sites. So we can then apply those site catalyst reports I was showing you earlier for refer a category, looking at organic search versus pay-per-click ads versus NG email, to these social media subcategories and see how visitors from these subcategories are interacting on our site. So this is right out of Site Catalyst. You can see the pages per visit for these subcategories and revenue per visit for each of these subcategories. Social bookmarking doesn't do anywhere near as well as the other subcategories. Here's another way of looking at it. The average pages per visit, if you recall, on our site from social media was 4.2. Social bookmarking visitors are only looking at 1.7 pages per visit, so they're often just kind of one and done. And social media sharing sites like YouTube and Flickr, they actually are interacting with our site a good bit, only a little bit below the average of 10 pages per visit on our site. Another way of looking at it, instead of just that one snapshot in time, is seeing how these subcategories are performing on a daily basis. And you can see where we get the biggest spikes. We're getting big spikes from the social news subcategory and the social bookmarking subcategory. So social bookmarking will often see new stories make it on Stumble Upon, and we'll get spikes every now and again from that. And the social news subcategory will get big spikes to our news site from social news sites like Dig and Reddit. You can see that very easily here. And Sergio mentioned it earlier, but over half of visits coming from the social media category are entering our website on our news section. So, and he touched on it, I think a big part of that is, all of those stories within our news section are within a social media template. It's very easy to put a story on Dig or promote it on Reddit or Stumble Upon, and there's a lot of cool photos and videos that are on our news site. So it's very popular with social media visitors. And though they don't get the traffic that the news site does, our channel and our magazine site actually do very well when it comes to pages from the social media category. Once people make it on that site, they do like what they see, and the photo albums on those sites are very easy to share and then browse through. So so I wanted to show some examples of what types of content interest social media visitors. So I'm going to show you some screenshots of the most popular stories on our site that attracted the most social media visitors. And I did this just by looking at the top entry pages for the social media category. Once we categorized our traffic into those categories, social media and organic search, it was very easy to then look at the top entry pages for each of those categories. And the top one, I believe this one got us over 150,000 visits a couple months ago, was for a show on our channel site around a guy that raised a grizzly bear from a cub. And there was a photo gallery on this show's site that had 25 photos in it. This made it on dig.com, and almost every single one of those visitors from dig.com, over 100,000, looked at every single one of those photos. I'd never seen anything like it, but they're all full of fantastic photos like this. Bear in a swimming pool, bear at a dining room table, guy with a crazy beard, really great photos. Another one, fish with a transparent head, another crazy photo. This is off our news site. This is actually interesting. This is a story from April 2002, so it's over 7 years old, but an example of how it doesn't really matter, I guess, to visitors from social media. If they see a cool photo or a cool story, they're going to share it regardless of how old it is. Some more photos. This is from our magazine site, Frozen Baby Mammoth Unearthed. Liquid water recently seen on Mars, the story goes. This is, again, off our news site. Another one off our news site. And again, off our news site. And this is actually, this was a very popular photo from that made it on dig.com. So what is the, what's the theme there? Well, by looking at all those top stories and then doing some more back-end analysis, it became clear that photos were a key driver when it came to attracting traffic from the social media category. In fact, visitors from social media are twice as likely to land on a photo page on our site than the average visitor is. So 42% of all visitors coming from social media are landing on a photo page, compared to only 21% of all other visitors.
Ted, are you seeing that a lot of those photos that people are submitting to sites like Dig are just submitted by users, or are they actually campaigns that you are internally doing with campaign tracking?
They are almost all users. We have people here, even in our photography department, that have accounts on Dig and Reddit, and they do submit stories. But I think, as a lot of you know, sites like those are powered a lot by power users, and who have a lot of friends associated with their account. And so, and so the stories that we submit often aren't very successful. But the stories that one of these top 100 users submit, people, their network of friends on those sites sees those and digs them, and they become very successful.
Interesting, and that's why you're seeing things that are 5 years old kind of resurface.
Yeah, we wouldn't promote that on our own. We would promote something brand new. Exactly. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing that we've seen, and we haven't come up with a perfect solution for, but in the last year or so, users on dig.com have started digging a lot of JPEG files directly. So instead of linking directly to an HTML page, they're linking just to the graphic. And so, of course, when someone comes to our site on that graphic, we can't tell that they were there, and we don't know how many times that was viewed unless we go into our server logs. And, of course, there's no ads on the page. So, they're just looking at the graphic and then leaving. So that's been a challenge for us, and we're talking about some ways of redirecting those folks, but that's been tricky. I want to talk a little bit about the long tail. Those stories that I showed you account for about 20% of our visits so far this year from social media sites, but 80% are coming from other stories. In fact, 100 pages accounted for 60%, but then 40%, almost 18,000 other pages accounted for the remainder. So a lot of our stories are attracting visitors from these social media sites. They just might not have the big spikes that those first 10 had. I also want to talk briefly about the popularity of social networks internationally. When we categorized our sources of traffic into social media and then those subcategories, I looked at the international audience as well. I didn't just look at Facebook, and, MySpace, and Dig, and the sites that are popular domestically, because a lot of those sites aren't used in some of the biggest countries in the world, like Russia and India and China. So we did some research on our end to make sure that we were classifying the popular social networks around the world, and so that the social media reporting that we have available now inside Catalyst accounts for those as well. Just a little bit about how we're doing internationally. Not too bad. On average, about 31% of our audience is international. 69% is domestic, U.S. and Canada. And social media is a little bit behind that, but not too far off. So 26% of visitors coming from the social media category are international. So a little room for improvement there, but we're not too far off the average. And, of course, the big question. As social media site, as traffic from social media is increasing, we get more and more questions about revenue potential, and is this making us money, these big spikes that we're getting. And we've been able to come close to answering that. So this particular slide here, the column on the left shows that an average visitor to our site and their average propensity to, say, order either something from our online store or a subscription online, or their value to us in terms of ad impressions. I can then compare this index to the other categories of traffic, sources of traffic. So organic search, for instance, slightly below average. Pay-per-click ads, way above average. They're 5 times more likely to order from us, for instance, than the average visitor, which makes sense. We're sending people directly to subscription forums or the online store. Then social media there is in the middle, and the average visitor on our site is actually 20 times more likely to purchase something on our site than someone coming from social media, which seems to gel with what Sergio was saying. I believe he said that 13% only use social media for online sales in his slide that said, what's it good for? And those social media subcategories that we created, we can then run that same index analysis on those as well and see that social news and social bookmarking, well, don't expect them, those visits to generate any orders for you, at least right away. So the average visitor for us is 50 times more likely to order something on our site than visitors coming from social news sites like Dig or Reddit, or social bookmarking sites like StumbleUpon or Delicious. We can break it down even further. In that key refers report that I was talking about, for instance, the one that allowed us to look at StumbleUpon, is StumbleUpon traffic is just a single value. You see the StumbleUpon, Dig, Reddit, they aren't going to order anything. And this is actually pretty helpful for us because we were doing advertising on StumbleUpon last fall, hoping to get subscriptions. And looking at this data now is probably not something that we're going to do anymore.
So you were optimizing those pages based on, say someone came to a popular photo from Dig. You're trying to optimize that landing page or whatever that they went to, but just aren't seeing a lot of conversion there.
Well, we like we were saying, we do try to promote certain stories on social media sites, either via sharing of links just manually or buying advertising. And in fact, Dig has a new advertising program coming out in the next few months that'll actually allow you to place a story within their natural results. And we probably will not use that to sell subscriptions or sell store items. Some other companies may still try that, but we're going to avoid that based on this data. And use it more to share cool media like photos and videos. We found that to be more successful with the Dig audience and the StumbleUpon audience. If we wanted to promote commerce, maybe we can look more at Twitter. They seem to be, this graph is showing 20 times more likely to order than a visitor from StumbleUpon or Dig. So I've spent a couple slides really bashing visitors coming from social media. Are they really all that worthless? And instead of providing some bullet points here, I thought I'd give you a case study. We advertised directly on Facebook a special promo directly, or just for Facebook users. The cheapest price you could find online for our magazine, just a 12-year subscription. I think the cover price is like $40 a year subscription, and you can find it on our homepage right now for $15. But that was the cheapest price online, and we promoted that all over Facebook last year in the middle of the holidays. And it only got us between 1 and 5 subscriptions a day. I mean, it was not successful at all. And looking back on that, and with the data that we have now, we would expect that now. Visitors from those sites just don't seem to convert very well. But what was interesting, and what makes us take a second look at social media, even though the initial numbers don't look that good, is that we found in March somebody had taken the tracking code that we used on that promotion and placed it throughout a network of deal sites like slickdeals.com. We placed a link there to this promotion. And that generated us thousands of orders that single day and several thousand orders the following day. More orders in a day for a subscription online than we had in any other day last year. So we looked at it and we're like, perhaps we need to be coming up with some other ways to attribute conversions to social media, because this is kind of a special type of visitor, right? You may not get that a lot of conversions or a lot of engagement from that initial visit, but this could be one visitor bringing 1,000 of their friends with them, right? So what? Maybe if they're just looking at 2 pages per visit, if they're bringing 1,000 people or more with them, that one initial engagement with that one visitor, if they're bringing thousands of their friends with them, turns into very, very valuable. So a few takeaways. Take your out-of-the-box refers report and enable conversion metrics and classifications on it. Allows you to categorize your traffic sources data offline in a spreadsheet. You can then upload that to create custom reports within your web analytics tool. We use Site Catalyst. I mentioned use National Geographic's refers categories report as a starting point. I also recommended the key refers report. And as far as types of content that we've found performs very well and attracts the social media audience, cool photos. Those are the big hits for us. And I talked a little bit about the subcategories of social media. Social news and social bookmarking sites are great for traffic. They can get you big spikes, but very poor for engagement. Social media sites in general just not as engaged as the average visitor on our site. However, I talked about it. Yes, that initial visit may not be as engaged as the average visitor is. However, there could be a domino effect. One visitor could turn into thousands of visitors. And so, even if the conversion rates are low or the pages per visit is low, if they're bringing thousands of people with them, the value of social media can be very high. So, our challenge coming up is taking that into consideration and tweaking the way we report social media to reflect that. And that's it for me.
Great, Ted. Thank you very much. That was very interesting to see how you classify everything, and I'm sure a lot of people are taking notes. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how at Omniture we're thinking about social media and a few of the different things that to think about when you're trying to measure social media. Well, there are a few challenges, and we've already referred to some of those. How is it affecting your brand perception, and how do you actually identify your advocates and your detractors? There are just so many people talking about your brand online, and so many different places to look. So where do you focus your time, and how do you influence people who are influential? We've also seen a lot of companies that are doing a great job at using social media to even do to do customer service, or listen to their customers for direct feedback and in product development. Well, we've been spending a lot of time focusing on Twitter lately, and you can see it's grown so fast. And even since this graph, a lot of celebrities have discovered it, and it's really become mainstream. But Forrester even has identified Twitter as uniquely valuable to marketers because it's so interactive and so immediate. You can get real-time feedback. One of the first things that they recommend doing is making sure that you secure your brand identity on Twitter, get a Twitter account, and just start listening to what people are saying about you. So another thing that you can do is identify in real time the issues people are having. If you're a software company, we've for example use it to monitor what people are saying about us and identify issues that people are having, and it's a great way to step in real time and help people out. It's also a great way to promote products and expertise and establish thought leadership. And also, like I said before, getting direct feedback from your customers, which is very valuable. We actually announced earlier this year an integration with Site Catalyst and Twitter, where we use the Twitter API to pull in data into Site Catalyst, and marketers are using it to filter for specific keywords that they're monitoring. Also, setting up notifications that go automatically to different stakeholders within the organization. And they don't actually have to be on Twitter search all the time. The nice thing is it's pulling all of the data into one place, and it's the place where marketers are already looking, where they're already measuring their online traffic. So you can, the last example here, you're even classifying people who are sending tweets as whatever you would like, a detractor, an advocate, or a neutral tweet. One of the other things that we announced recently is a Facebook app measurement. A lot of marketers are using apps within Facebook to promote content because it's a great way to spread for content to spread virally. But one of the things that they're tasked with that has been difficult is understanding exactly how customers are engaging with that content. Measuring what's effective within the apps and what isn't, and then making the app better, and then tracking engagement and see how it results. Does it result in conversion? Is there a way to make your Facebook apps influence conversion even more? So those are the kinds of things that we're looking to answer for marketers. So the first problem that we're solving here, obviously, is just ROI. Now, is it worth creating a Facebook app? All the time that we spend in putting one together, it basically is going to empower marketers to measure the impact of these campaigns. You're looking at adoption, social activity, and loyalty and brand awareness in Site Catalyst, where you're already tracking your other online metrics. And then also, you're uncovering a relationship between the app, Facebook app usage, and also conversion via other online channels. So you're looking at a single version of the truth. So how are people converting on mobile or email or on your website compared to social media? That way, you're able to monetize your app investment and figure out what makes sense to develop and what isn't working. So here's an example. Say a media company, this one's called Media Universe, is creating a Facebook app to allow their users to engage with content. You can run a few different reports with Insight Catalyst to take a look at what's working. Here, for example, is an app sections report where you're looking at what sections of the app are receiving the most page views. This one, for example, video is very popular. You can see here in video of celebrities. So you might want to optimize your app to take advantage of that information. You can also see which apps are, how your apps are doing, how many people are inviting other Facebook users to use them, and how quickly it's spreading. And then a typical application conversion funnel here. You can even see, where from in-app product searches down through click-throughs and checkouts, and how many orders that generates in revenue. So it gives you a better idea of how your Facebook apps are contributing to your overall marketing mix. I think this is interesting, being able to segment Facebook users by the number of friends that they have. And in this example here, you can see that the users with more than 500 friends have a much higher percentage of invites and shares, and are more engaged with the content, leaving more comments, and inviting more people to use the app. So you might want to focus more on people with more than 500 friends on Facebook. And just like Ted showed earlier, you should break down your different social media sources and take a look at how it's contributing to your overall marketing mix. Compared to direct visits to your website or email, you can see social media in this example is contributing to your bottom line, and then you can even look at it further and identify which is it blogs that you should focus on, or a message board in particular. But it is important to understand where you should focus your energy with regard to social media. So that is the presentation. If you have any questions, be sure to follow up with us at webinars@omniture.com. But for Sergio and Ted, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today.